regardless of whether we live in Turkestan or the diaspora have become affected. All of the Turkestanis here today have relatives, some of which are their mothers, fathers, aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers who have been sent to concentration camps. Millions of Uyghurs and other Turkic people, including Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, Uzbeks, and Tatars, are currently locked up in the concentration camps, sent to prisons, labor camps, and used as slave labor. In the case of Turkestani women, the atrocities that they have faced go beyond torture, as they are subjected to forced marriages, sexual humiliation, rape, forced abortion, and sterilization. This has caused our entire nation, especially the women, both physically and psychologically damaged that is irreparable. Over 500,000 Uyghur and other Turkic children have been torn apart from their mothers, their family, and sent to state-run orphanages and broad schools to be brainwashed into worship the CCP and the China state as their mothers and family. Their identity as Uyghur, Kazakh, Kyrgyz, Uzbek, and Tatar has been removed from them and replaced by an identity labeling them as loyal Chinese communist citizens. Besides, hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples, including tens of thousands of women, are being used as slave labor. The people of East Turkestan don't have much time. Every day, countless lives are lost. Women and children especially are suffering. Our people are on the brink of being wiped out. I especially call on women's rights organizations and children's rights organizations to break their silence and speak out against China and its CCP atrocities against women and children in occupied East Turkestan. As a woman, as a mother, a wife, and as an Uyghur American, I call on the U.S. Senate to pass Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and urge the President to sign into law as soon as possible. I urge the U.S. Congress to recognize China and its CCP's Uyghur genocide and pass the genocide resolution quickly. I urge the U.S. Congress to pass Congressman Scott's bill that would designate the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. Lastly, I urge the U.S. Congress to treat East Turkestan on par with Tibet by recognizing East Turkestan as an independent country that is occupied by China. We can have no human rights or freedom while the murderous CCP criminals can get away with attacks on the whole of humanity. We call on the U.S. Congress and the U.S. government and the entire world to take stronger actions to hold China and its CCP accountable. Thank you so much.
Now I would like to invite Sehun Kim, Captive Nation Coalition. Up.
Hello, everyone. Today is a very special day, December 10th, where we remember human rights and celebrate human rights and do everything that we can to preserve human rights in our country. Before I start, I just want to start off with something that just happened a second ago. A heckler just came by and stared at our signs and said, leave China to do what it is, right? Basically saying, China's doing a great job. Sounds hilarious, but it's also a serious issue. In our country, there are individuals like that, unfortunately in higher up places, that are causing this, what you see in this picture right now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is only a beginning. I'm not here to support any candidate or any party. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here as an American. I'm here as a human being, and I'm here as a brother to all of the people of East Turkestan, the Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Tajiks, as well as all the Tibetan, Southern Mongolians, and the Chinese people. This issue is greater than all of us. And it is greater than all of us because this is the task that I truly believe that the Lord gave us. To not only solve, but to also reflect upon our past actions. I hold this sign today proudly to let the world know that this is just, unfortunately, the beginning. And it is only the beginning because whatever is happening in China under the grasp of the Chinese Communist Party will most likely spread to our shores, quite literally. This is the battle that we have to fight, not only diplomatically and politically, but in our homes as well. You know, this whole narrative that, oh, everything's made in China, it's so difficult to just, simply boycott them. Well, remember, as an immigrant, I can also tell you that this nation is known for making a difference that was impossible. We did put a man on the moon when it was impossible. We did win the Civil War when people have said that institutionally slavery was impossible to get rid of. So no, do not tell me that bullcrap. Because here in this country, anything is possible. And I call upon all Republicans, Democrats, Independent, or anybody who's not politically affiliated to be united as Americans. What we saw today, as that heckler said, is embarrassing. But unfortunately, it's the reality that we face today in the mindset of so many countless Americans and the people around the world. And I say this today, let's wake up. Let's all hold our hands together as Americans. Doesn't matter if you're Republicans, Democrats, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, it does not matter. We are all one together under this flag that we call the proud flag of the United States of America. And I would like to also mention this. We all look different, but at heart, the same blood flows within all of our bodies. And we have to hold ourselves accountable for that. What do I mean by accountable? As human beings, we are obligated to act on human rights. We are obligated to do what the Lord has given in our lives to do, which is to do the right thing at all cost. You know, none of these folks should actually be up in this stand today with their flags and with their message of stop the genocide. It should have been done a long time ago. And our ancestors are rolling over their graves as they are looking at us right now, as that, why are you making the same mistakes as we are? Where so many Jews have been killed, exterminated in concentration camps, where so many soldiers had to give up their lives to protect, to fight against the evil that existed once before. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let us not continue that mistake. Let us stand as proud Americans, and let us also stand as free people of the world under the banner of justice and true freedom. Stop the genocide and stop the constant forgetfulness of what we all stand for, which is freedom. God bless the United States of America, and God bless the rest of the world, and let us all do the right thing. God bless you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now, I would like to give a speech. I want to thank everyone for being here today and standing with us in the solidarity with the victims of China and its Communist Party. My name is Arif Jan. I am an Uyghur from East Turkestan who has been living in exile since 4 years old. Today is International Human Rights Day. For the past 71 years since China occupied East Turkestan, our people have been deprived of all human rights and freedom. We are facing nothing less than a genocide. The genocide and loss of human rights and freedom stem from China and its Communist Party invading East Turkestan. Over the past 71 years, millions of our people were killed by China and the CCP through various means, including nuclear testing, organ harvesting, forced abortion, execution, and torture. Today, we face a 21st century Holocaust like genocide where millions of our people are locked up in concentration camps and prisons. The CCP is eradicating our culture, religion, identity, and our very own existence. Today, hundreds and thousands of Uyghurs and other Turkic people are being used as slaves by CCP. That is why U.S. Senate must pass the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act with urgency. We urge Americans and all people of world to boycott Made in China. We urge U.S. Congress, the U.S. government, and all the NTDs worldwide to acknowledge the East Turkestan is an independent country occupied by China. We call the world to recognize the Uyghurs as who they are, a unique, separate nation, not by what the China CCP claims who we are. We all deserve a state where we can live and breathe as a free men and women, where we can celebrate our culture, speak our mother tongue, and worship freely. China and CCP falsely claim East Turkestan as part of China, yet they refer East Turkestan as Xinjiang, which translates as new territory. In reality, East Turkestan is an independent state that has been illegally occupied since 1949.
Is an independent state that has been illegally occupied since 1949. The CCP has spread corruption to all parts of the world, including here in the United States. The CCP coronavirus has caused the loss of over 1.5 million lives across the globe, including over 286,000 here in the United States. It has decimated the global economy and deprived us from many of the freedom we enjoy here in the U.S. The CCP has used its spies and agents to coerce, infiltrate, and corrupt organizations, individuals, and communities worldwide, including here in the United States. The world has to recognize China under the CCP is not a state, nor is it a nation, neither a country. It is an evil empire ruled by criminal communist dictatorship that invades, occupies, subjugates other countries and its people. Unfortunately, due to world leader appeasement policies towards CCP, the evil empire is expanding. The CCP rose to the power in China on October 1st, 1949. China then invaded its neighbor countries of East Turkestan, South Mongolia, Tibet, creating the evil empire known as the People's Republic of China. East Turkestan, South Mongolia, Tibet, and Hong Kong are suffering under the evil PRC empire occupation. Taiwan, India, and the whole of the Indo-Pacific are under constant threat of invasion. If the world fails to act, it won't be long before evil empire expand its physical borders by invading other souvenir nation, which will lead to the downfall of democracy and human rights as across the world. The people of East Turkestan, South Mongolia, Tibet, and Hong Kong and Taiwan do not wish to be part of this empire. Nor do the people of China want to be governed by the CCP. It is time that the world has said enough is enough and take the strong, concrete action to bring down the CCP and dissolve this empire. At the end, I would like to say, never again, question mark, question mark, question mark. Thank you. Now we will chant for 10 minutes. After that, we're going to wrap up. So.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. Thank you to all of our great American friends and supporters for coming out here from all across the country, really, to stand in solidarity with the people of East Turkestan and others who are victims of China and its Communist Party. We hope that our message is clear, has gotten clearly to the United States Congress and to the United States government. If the U.S. Congress fails to recognize the CCP as a transnational criminal organization within the next several weeks, we hope and we urge President Trump to sign an executive order recognizing the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. Similarly, there is no doubt what China is doing in East Turkestan is a genocide. So if the Senate and the House fail to get this genocide resolution passed as soon as possible, then it is up to the U.S. government, and especially President Trump, to show moral leadership by signing an executive order to recognize China's atrocities against Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples in occupied East Turkestan as a genocide. Now we'd like to, before we wrap up, we're going to chant for about 10 minutes. It's already 1 o'clock, and so I don't want to keep everyone here longer than they should be, longer than they were. So if you could just bear with us. Gonna face that way. Or, yeah, we're just gonna face that way. Recognize the CCP as a transnational criminal organization. The CCP is a criminal organization. The CCP is a criminal organization. Stand up, America! Stand up, America! Stand up, America! Stand up, America! Stand up against criminal China!
Stand up against criminal China!
Stand up against the CCP criminals!
Stand up against the CCP criminal!
Stand up, America!
Stand up, America!
Stand up, America!
Stand up, America!
Stand up against Fascist China!
Fascist China!
Fascist CCP!
Fascist CCP!
Criminal China!
Criminal China!
Criminal CCP!
Criminal CCP!
Down, down!
Nazi China!
Fascist China!
Nazi China!
Nazi China!
Welcome back, everyone. We're here standing in front of the U.S. Capitol, and we are here supporting one of the rallies calling on the designation of the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. The organizers here are with the Stop the Steal rally. They're here supporting some of the different groups. We have Muslim Uyghurs, we have Chinese Christians, we have Catholic groups here, all coming together to call for an end of persecution in China, to call for religious freedom in China, and to call again for the Chinese Communist Party, the communist system in power in China, to be designated a transnational criminal organization for its abuses of human rights, for its suppression of religious freedom, and for its suppression of free speech. So we have a few different groups out here. Again, the Stop the Steal rally, Phyllis Schlafly Eagles. We're going to get a few different people to speak with us now, working on that now. We have Frank Gaffney coming on in just a second. He's with the coalition, he's with the coalition of the Present Danger China. So let's see if we can get him on right now. Frank Gaffney, it's a real pleasure. Yeah, thanks again. Thank you. Really appreciate what you guys do. You too, as well, yeah.
Put it on, okay.
Up here.
Really? I can't see what I'm doing.
It's okay, we got you.
No.
I trust you're getting paid union wages to do this.
All right, Nelson, we're good. Yeah, so Frank Gaffney, it's a real pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you.
So, of course, you're with the coalition of the Present Danger China, and you've recognized now China, the Chinese Communist Party specifically, as a threat to the United States. What was it that made you all make this coalition to recognize the CCP as a threat to the U.S.?
Well, the perception and the reality that the Chinese Communist Party seeks the destruction of the United States was kind of the impetus behind pulling together what is really the third iteration of this, the fourth iteration, I guess, actually, of this committee. There were two during the Cold War. There was a third shortly after the attacks of 9/11. And then this one was started up in the spring of 2019. It seems like it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been a long year.
18,
it's been a long
months.
year.
It's been a very long year. Exactly right. Anyway, so we came together, as did the one that was probably most impactful, which was in 1976, and wound up helping Ronald Reagan conceive of and socialize with the American people the idea that his time's existential threat to freedom had to be resisted, not appeased, which was the plan of détente, as you may remember. And so we're very much inspired by that, and we believe that pulling together a similar kind of team of subject matter experts and national security practitioners and human rights leaders, religious freedom activists, and the like would enable us to hopefully help this time's leaders, whoever they may be, address properly this time's existential threat to freedom, which of course is the Chinese Communist Party.
So we're in an interesting situation right now. We have the Stop the Steal rally working together with the Muslim Uyghur community, calling for human rights in China. There's Christian groups here. There's Falun Gong practitioners here. There's an interesting bringing together of all these different camps opposing the Chinese Communist Party and standing by what the United States stands for. I guess, of course, you're here as well. I mean, what's your perception of this, I'd say, battle with the United States and the Chinese Communist Party and a lot of these different groups coming together in ways we've never really seen before, I think, to stand up freedom and to oppose the Chinese Communist Party. What's your perception of this?
Well, let me just say, I think the Epoch Times has had a significant role in helping lots of people who might not otherwise have perceived the threat from the CCP do so and realize that common cause needs to be made given the magnitude of the danger it poses to all of us. But I think that what we've been witnessing is, especially with the COVID-19 or CCP virus, I prefer to call it, attack on our country, deliberately undertaken by the Chinese Communist Party, if not actually engineered for the purpose, certainly exploited once it emerged. That, I think it was Samuel Johnson said, had the effect of concentrating the mind wondrously, because the prospect of hanging does that to you. And I think that what we're witnessing, thanks in no small measure, of course, to President Trump's leadership and that of almost all of his administration, Secretary Steve Mnuchin of the Treasury Department is a notable exception to that. But just about everybody else has been very clear about the fact that we're now dangerously exposed, both externally and internally, not just to Chinese influence operations, but to the CCP's more mortal threats, the unrestricted warfare that it has talked about now for decades as their strategy for taking us down.
Well, you know what's interesting? I know you and I have, of course, been writing about this stuff for quite a while now. I never actually thought it would become a mainstream topic. It was always a few defense experts and, international security experts talking about this threat kind of on the fringes. I never thought it'd be center stage in front of the U.S. Capitol. But now it's one of the main discussions, even with the election. Was China involved with these machines that influenced the election? Was China involved with influence operations that impacted the stances politically of different U.S. leaders? What's your perception, I think, of the way the Chinese Communist Party uses these networks to manipulate politics? Now that it's becoming one of the main discussions in the U.S.
Well, you've said a lot of things that are interesting I'd like to talk about. But on that last question, I think that what we have witnessed unmistakably is the use of political warfare as one of the vectors of attack for the Chinese Communist Party in its unrestricted warfare campaign. And as you know, that kind of political warfare includes everything from influence operations, from corruption of political leaders, from subversion, from running United Front organizations to do things like registering voters. And I think probably in the process recruiting them for the Chinese Communist Party as well. And of course, not least, using civil strife, including violent insurrectionary activity, as an instrument for taking down our country and our government. And the thing that's just maddening most to me and to our Committee on the Present Danger of China has been the extent to which we have been enabling so much of that by the transfer of wealth to the CCP, mostly from unwitting American investors and the indexes or pension funds or whatever else might be the instrument for doing it. Trillions of dollars have made it possible for the Chinese Communist Party to be the threat that it is today. So all of this is, I think, now beginning to become more evident to more people. And one of the things we really set our sights on as the committee got started in March of 2019 was the idea of making sure the public actually understood these various dimensions of the threat and that we had to respond appropriately. And very much the way that the Committee on the Present Danger did during the run-up to the Reagan administration in terms of thinking about a strategy that could win, thinking about how the public could be pulled in behind it. And I'm gratified that that's borne some fruit, again, for lots of different reasons, but we're in a desperately late hour for winning if we're going to. And I think the thing that's exciting about the kinds of coalitions that are now coming together. And, you know, the enactment, or at least the passage in both houses of Congress recently by unanimous votes. I can't remember the last time something consequential had that kind of support. The truth of the matter is that it has a sort of a get out of jail free card, this particular legislation that said we're not going to allow you, the Chinese Communist Party and its front companies, to have access to our capital markets unless you submit to our accounting standards. But the law gives them 3 years to do that.
That's a long time to cause a lot of damage.
It's a very long time. So that's one of those things that I think is offsetting a little bit my enthusiasm for both the bill and the prospect of real bipartisanship. But what's also concentrating our minds, I think, and it's tragic, you mentioned the American people and the election. I was just being apprised today that 10% of self-described Biden voters didn't know, despite your best efforts and despite, you know, the New York Post's and Tucker Carlson's, most of those voters had no idea that Joe Biden was as compromised by the Chinese Communist Party as he is. Witness Hunter Biden's computer and so on. And more to the point, had they known, they would not have voted for him.
Oh, wow.
So when you look at that and you realize that the media, social and traditional, essentially through this election, by virtue of refusing to cover that story, or at least cover it accurately, calling it Russian, you know, disinformation, that is another example of the fraud that we've been subjected to. And it's imperative that we spare our country, I think, having somebody who is president and is compromised by the Chinese Communist Party, because there's no mistaking it. They will exploit that. They will not simply take advantage of it, but I think they will be emboldened to believe this is the moment when they can decisively take us out.
Frank Gaffney, it's a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for what you do.
And this guy's been calling out the dangers of the Chinese Communist Party longer than I have. So.
Well, communists longer than you've been alive is the point. But it's an ongoing affair.
Really appreciate
Thank you.
it, sir.
Thanks for what you do again.
Yeah.
Hey, you're welcome. Hi.
Give me 1 minute. We're doing a broadcast.
Sorry, I gotta get that off.
A lot of people here talking about human rights in China, calling out the Chinese Communist Party for its abuses of those rights, calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational criminal organization, and also calling for the Stop the Steal, standing up against the subversion of our country and what's happening right now with China as it relates again to the election as well. Now, we have a few other guests coming on. Just give us a minute. We have coming up Michael Yan. He is a war correspondent, and he was in Hong Kong during these democracy protests. Michael Yan, it's a real pleasure having you on the show. Thank you.
Good to be back with you.
Yeah, so you might remember, Michael, we had him on during the Hong Kong protests, and Michael, it's great seeing you out here.
Thank you. Came back in September straight to Portland because of the issues with Antifa out there, and then up to Washington State, then here, Philadelphia, back here, down to Atlanta, Florida, and back here again, basically just watching the situation unfold.
Yeah, and so you all might remember, last time we spoke with you, I think you were in Singapore because they kicked you out of Hong Kong, right?
Right, they kicked me out of Hong Kong and went to Thailand, where I have an office,
yeah.
Right. And actually I was heading to Taiwan, and then from Thailand, but then the issues kicked up in the United States. And so I came to the United States instead of Taiwan.
Yeah. Now, we're an interesting rally right now. There's a very diverse group of people. There's Muslim Uyghurs, there's Falun Gong practitioners, there's Catholics, there's Christians, who knows what else, actually. And all coming together, really, you know, the closeness of the people here is interesting. It seems everyone gets along great, coming together for one common cause, which is standing up against socialism, whether it's in China or whether it's here in the United States. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, that's what I do. You know, that's why I was in Hong Kong, and that's why they kicked me out of Hong Kong. This is an existential threat for a lot of people, not just the Uyghurs and the Tibetans, not just Hong Kong or Taiwan, but the United States and Japan as well. That's why we have somebody from Okinawa here. I see many people from, like you said, from around the world. And the scourge of communism just doesn't go away. We're going to have to continue to fight it and continue to beat it.
Now, Michael, now you've of course worked on exposing these different, say, insurgency movements. Oftentimes, at least in Hong Kong, you were of course with the Hong Kong protesters opposing the Chinese Communist Party. Now we see in the United States the other side of it. People say there's also an insurgency movement that has been trying to undermine the President of the United States, Donald Trump, at least until recently. And we see now these allegations of the election being stolen. What are your perceptions of this? What is going on in this country right now?
It's clear that there's a vast attempt to steal the election. That's obvious to anybody that's paying attention and who's honest about it. There is clearly more than one insurgency, and some of this has been cooking for many generations, since long before our grandparents were born, and some of it's coming to fruition. Some of it's sponsored by China, and other components are not. But certainly they're coming to a head in the United States. I think 2021 could be a lot more intense than 2020 has been. People need to prepare for, be prepared for a much more intense 2021.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, it's a real pleasure having this show. Thanks again. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Josh.
Always good seeing you. Thank you. Yeah, so, folks, again, we're here at the one of the Stop the Steal rally events. This one is with the different human rights organizations calling for the ends of persecutions in China. And this is specifically calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational organized criminal organization. We have a few other people here with us we're going to be speaking to. Just give us a minute. Everybody, we're again here at one of the rallies in Washington, D.C., and we're here with Ed Martin with the Phyllis Schlafly's Eagles, and he's one of the organizers of the Stop the Steal protest. And so, Ed, it's a real pleasure having you on the show.
Well, thanks. Great to see you again. I appreciate it. Thanks for a chance to talk to your great listeners.
Yeah, so the event we're at specifically right now is calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational criminal organization. And it's interesting to see that the Stop the Steal rally organizers are also backing this. Why back this as well? I'm curious.
Well, I wear a couple hats when I showed up. And as I said when I spoke, my old mentor, my boss, the late Phyllis Schlafly, she wrote for the last 2.5 decades of her life about the problem of the communist regime. She was writing ahead of a lot of Americans and had a letter. It was called the Cardinal Mincenti letter. And Cardinal Mincenti was a famous Hungarian cardinal, Catholic cardinal, who stood up against the Soviets, kind of like Cardinal Zen has done in China. So we care about this issue a lot. And so when we talked about this was happening, I had that interest. And then Stop the Steal, you know, what we've seen in the last 4 years, this president has helped clarify how the Chinese regime, the communist regime, has tried to corrupt America. They've tried to corrupt us with fentanyl. They try to corrupt us with getting our Wall Street companies to act against our interests. Our universities, our politicians, you know, these Congressmen Swalwell. I mean, a lot of things that have happened. And I don't know anyone that seriously thinks the Chinese communists decided to stand down on the election. Why would they? They're doing everything they can in every other aspect. And what we've seen, the evidence that's been presented, lots of indications of things that don't make sense, the things that are related to software, related to management of the election system, and we want to get to the bottom of it. So I believe this president helped us, the American people, realize what some of us knew, which is that the Communist Party in China is a criminal entity. It's not an interesting aberration in leadership. It's a criminal entity. Its goal is to destroy other nations, to dominate them, and we have to be clear about that.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see because, you know, you and I, of course, have known each other for a few years now.
Yep.
Actually, they invited a few of us to speak. I was one of the speakers at one of your conferences.
Eagle Council, yep.
And at that time, the idea that the Chinese Communist Party was waging an unconventional war on the United States was still kind of a fringe topic.
Yep.
And you recognize the seriousness. And here we are now. This is one of the main narratives with what's happening in the country.
Yeah, no, you're right. And again, I give Phyllis Schlafly credit. She was very, very smart about looking down the field and not being afraid to. You know, you look around this town, there's a lot of institutions, conservative and liberal so-called, who have received benefits from dealing with the Chinese communist regime. You don't have to dig deep to see it, and therefore the policies and the way they think about policies have been to stand back. And we have been very blessed. Nobody gets to say what we believe, and we were ahead on that. I think we also saw what the work you were doing and the Epoch Times to give us a focus. So, but look, what's happening here is it's important. The election, Stop the Steal, is important, but as important is the momentum of elected officials and others recognizing. You have to name what's happening, otherwise you can't combat it. And again, when you say that the Communist Party is a criminal enterprise, you're naming what has happened in a way that gives you a way to act on it, right? If you have a criminal enterprise, you have to do something about it. And it's important for the American people to keep making progress with our leaders in holding them accountable on that.
Yeah. And in terms of where the country's at right now, people are talking about, as I've said on my show many times, freedom versus socialism.
Yeah.
And this seems to be the narrative of what is happening in just about every part of the country. Not just the United States, even other countries as well. Europe, Australia, China even itself. People are standing up against tyranny, and tyranny is fighting back.
Right, and also, and you know, one of the things that the communist regime in China teaches us is there were a lot of Americans that would have conversations. They'd say things like, "Look, China's economy is actually sort of open. Some of these businesses are sort of independent," and what we know is that's not true. In America, some of the big tech giants are so co-opted by the system, by the swamp, and by China, the regime, that they are part of the problem, right? So the American people are looking up, and they're not just saying, "Give us freedom." They're saying the institutions have been corrupted. The fake news has been really destructive. The big tech companies really destructive. And we have to take a lesson as we see what domination, because America has more freedom in our nation than, of course, the Chinese because of the communist regime. But we have to be careful to see what could happen. And also we have to challenge ourselves to support people all over the world that are look, the reason I care about the Chinese people succeeding is I do have faith, and I want every single person to have dignity. But as an American, I care most that we stop the communist regime from destroying my nation. I want the Chinese people to have a wonderful nation someday too. Right now, the communist regime is a threat to my children and to our nation, and every nation should feel that way. So it is Americans' eyes are opened, but we have a lot more work to do.
Now, Ed, just last question.
Yeah.
One of the themes here today is religious freedom.
Yeah.
You, of course, have your beliefs.
Yeah.
You were standing together with the Muslim Uyghurs and supporting them just as much.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I mean, you know, from the founding of America, we were always, our founding documents are so interesting to study, but also the founding principles. America was founded as a Judeo-Christian nation. meaning you didn't have to be either one of those faiths, but the thing that held us together was this sort of set of values. And then we allowed freedom for everyone. That was always our position, and that was extraordinarily important. When you look at what's happening with the Chinese regime, whether the adherents of Falun Gong, the Uyghurs, Catholics, who I know well, Cardinal Zen I mentioned, the oppression of communism is anti-freedom for everyone. So you don't get to say, well, I'm a Christian, they're not being so tough on me. No, their principle is that way. And so when we stand together, I think Americans have this great tradition of religious liberty, and we want that for everyone. That's in our DNA. But we also see China. The regime is they're not, again, it's not a debate about whether they think the schools should have the ability to teach something. They're taking people out of their families and putting them in camps. They're taking people and oppressing the way they learn their life and the stories of the Falun Gong. Is it Jennifer Zen?
Jennifer Zhang, yes.
Her book is extraordinary. What they did to her family and to her. That kind of thing is not in a novel. That's in what's in life, and we have to be stronger about that than ever because of the oppression. So it's American to be for religious liberty, but it's also necessary because we're worried about what the communist regime can do all over the world.
Great. Ed Martin, it's a real pleasure having the show.
Great to see you again, yeah.
And again, Ed Martin's one of the organizers as well of the Stop the Steal rally. He's going to be heading that up on Saturday in Washington, D.C.
Big deal on Saturday, yeah. We'll hope to see you there.
Great. Ed, pleasure as always.
Thank you. Thanks, yep. Good seeing you. Yep. Good. Great. Oh, yeah, take it. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Bye, man. Good to see you. Thank
you. All right, so folks, we're still here at one of the rallies alongside the Stop the Steal rally. This one is co-sponsored by them, and this is again calling for an end, right? Calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational organized criminal organization. And so we're again speaking to some different folks here, calling out what the Chinese Communist Party is, which is a totalitarian system that operates like a mafia and that is persecuting religion, persecuting the freedom of speech of every person in the country, and also doing different methods such as unrestricted warfare to target other countries, including the United States. We have a few other people here we're going to be speaking with. Let's jump into some of the other interviews now. Actually, Saleh Hudayar, one sec. Yeah, you might remember Saleh Hudayar. He's the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile with the Muslim Uyghurs. So we'll get a mic on you in just one sec. Okay. Saleh Hudayar, it's a real pleasure having you back on the show. Thank you very much. And so, interesting times we're in. So, Saleh Hudayar is again the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile, the Muslim Uyghurs we hear about. And we've seen a lot of development since we last spoke. We've seen different organizations, different businesses, different Chinese Communist Party officials get sanctioned for their use of slave labor in Xinjiang, also called East Turkestan, which was invaded, of course, by the Chinese Communist Party. And so, Saleh, why don't you tell us about a bit about this event we just held here?
So we just held a large rally here in front of the U.S. Capitol to commemorate International Human Rights Day by urging the U.S. Congress to designate China's Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. I would say that's like the most kind way that we could use to describe what China's Communist Party really is. I mean, I would go far as beyond as calling it a terrorist organization. After all, they've killed over 70 million people, more than any other regime throughout history.
In terms of the suppression, political suppression, in terms of the use of violence for political goals, in terms of the way it pushes down people with free speech, in terms of what it does with human rights abuses, I think you're right on that.
Yes. And right now they're engaging in a Holocaust-like genocide in East Turkestan. Millions of people are locked up in concentration camps. Yesterday, Ethan Goodman, he revealed some more up-to-date information about organ harvesting and discovered that in some concentration camps in East Turkestan, there are crematoriums, high-tech crematoriums, smokeless high-tech crematoriums, and these concentration camps are within a few kilometers of airports where there are special lanes for organs only. So you can say from this we have evidence that China is killing people in the concentration camps, harvesting their organs, and then cremating them to hide the evidence. There have also been, RFA has reported, and they've interviewed Chinese police working in these concentration camps. One of these gentlemen, he said, within a 6-month period, over 150 people had died in one small concentration camp alone.
Yeah. So those of you who are watching this, the Epoch Times actually first broke this story back 2006, I believe it was, that the Chinese Communist Party was using political prisoners, people persecuted for their faith, for their beliefs, or for speaking out against the regime itself, using them as living sources for organ transplants. Among the main victims of this, Muslim Uyghurs, Falun Gong practitioners, even house Christians and others. And as you mentioned now, they have a fast-track system for this, even having lanes at the airport where people can be more quickly brought into the system to be killed for their organs. I mean, horrifying stuff.
I mean, it is a 21st century Holocaust-like genocide. The U.S. Senate back in October introduced a resolution to recognize the atrocities as a genocide. We're again urged the U.S. Congress to recognize, to pass this resolution as soon as possible. And if that doesn't happen, we've been urging the State Department and the White House to recognize the atrocities as a genocide and take stronger actions to hold China accountable. In fact, we put forth a complaint to the International Criminal Court against 31 Chinese officials for genocide and other crimes against humanity in East Turkestan.
Now, Sally, we're in an interesting situation in this country right now. As you were holding this event, calling for an end of genocide in China, we had a heckler come by and throw insults at you folks, and saying, of course, let China do what they want, essentially, and was angry because, of course, you have stop the steal signs about the presidential elections right now. It's a bizarre situation because on one side you have people who say that they support Muslims, they oppose genocide, they oppose things like the Nazi regime that carried out very similar things. But with you folks, when you're calling for religious freedom, calling for an end to genocide, somehow they don't put two and two together on this. If you were to give one message to the American people on this and what you stand for, what would you say?
I mean, we're essentially striving for our existence. That's about it. We have no alternative motives. We're not trying to, we don't hate China, we're not here trying to take a part of China or anything. We just want what's ours. China, under the Communist Party, invaded our country, took us over, and this is something that could happen to other countries. The Belt and Road Initiative. China made the Chinese Communist Party in 1949. They made the same promises that they are selling to countries across the world through the Belt and Road Initiative. We're going to help you develop your country. We're going to help you, modernize all this. We're going to give you loans, etc. But in the end, what they're doing is they're setting themselves up for neo-colonization. These countries, the Chinese Communist Party, they flood it with Chinese workers. So the available, workforce, they don't have jobs. Then they bring in, their wives, their children, their families, and then you have neo-colonies, small colonies set up. And over the course of several decades, you have the demographics are altered out on a large scale. East Turkestan, for example, in 1949, over 90% Uyghur and other Turkic peoples, less than 5% Chinese. Today, we're about 45 to 50% Uyghur and other Turkic peoples to about 40% Chinese. This is what, Belt and Road brought us, the precursor of Belt and Road, you could say, and China is trying to export this to other countries. People, regardless of what country, what ideology that they have, they need to understand that the CCP is a threat to their own existence, to their own sovereignty, and they need to protect it at all costs.
Saleh Houdiar, real pleasure having the show. Thank you very much. Thank you. Folks, again, we're here in front of the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. at a rally calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational criminal organization. And also the folks organizing it are with the Stop the Steal rally. We have a few other folks here with us. We have here Jason Johnson,
Jason Jones.
Jason Jones.
Good to see you. It's close.
Close.
Hey, you're warm. I like that.
Got my hands in my pockets. Yeah, and so, Jason, of course, you're a Hollywood producer. You're with a few other organizations talking about human rights as well. Now, it's interesting to see you out here because this is both an event for human rights and an event talking about Stop the Steal. What do you think brings these two issues together?
Oh, the CCP. I think the CCP brings these two issues together. You know, I make films to promote human dignity, to inspire solidarity with the vulnerable. By God's grace, they've been very successful, so people think of me as a filmmaker, but I think of myself as a human rights activist who uses film. And it is a privilege to be here because when you think of the Uyghur, they're the most vulnerable people in the world right now. And when you stand with the vulnerable, there's a cost. If you're in the entertainment industry and you want to stand up to the CCP, your manager, your agent, your producing partners, your investors, they're going to lean on you to shut up. But I'm here because if we can't stand with the truly vulnerable, then why even use words like justice ever? Really, you know?
Well, and that's an important point because we often see people in Hollywood talking about save the dolphins and save the seals or whatever. But when it comes to calling out genocide, actual genocide, calling out the crimes against humanity where people are being used as living sources for organ transplants, there's a hesitation on calling this out. Why is this?
Well, I think, first of all, the crimes of the CCP are so horrific that they seem unbelievable. They are unthinkable. They're unimaginable. So I think it's easy for people to just try to dismiss. And then when you can no longer evade the truth of what the CCP is doing, then you realize it's dangerous to stand up to the CCP. As we have heard with the braggadocious professor this week, they have friends everywhere. So it takes courage. The world is dividing into really two groups. Those who are willing to stand with the vulnerable and those who are willing to profit from the exploitation of the vulnerable. It's no longer clear-cut where it's the United States in one corner and the Soviet Union in the other corner. Now, in one corner is the CCP, is Apple, is Walmart, is Coca-Cola. And in the other corner are just those folks like the Epoch Times, the Uyghur who are here today, the Falun Gong. These are the folks who have been ambushed by violence. So they have a deep empathy that they have experienced through their own personal suffering. When you experience the suffering, then it really awakens in you a sense of solidarity with other people who suffer. I lost a child to violence, my first child, when I was a young man. That is what woke me up. So when I think of China's first victim, the CCP's first victim were the Chinese. You think of the one-child policy. Every family in China is addled by the sorrow caused by the CCP, the inescapable grief of the one-child policy, they still have coerced abortions, by the way, the inescapable grief of not being able to protect your daughter or your wife from the state-sponsored violence in the womb. You think of the Barron Massacre from 1990, the only massacre that happened in the womb, hundreds and hundreds of forced abortions when China pushed in, the CCP pushed in to East Turkestan and rounded up all of those pregnant women. A massacre in the womb. So what started in China is spreading out around the world.
Now, Jason, you're in an interesting position as well. You're in Hollywood. You could make a lot of money producing films and these types of things, but you're doing this also for a human rights purpose. And you're standing by people whose beliefs are different than yours. Why is this?
Well, it's... First of all, I love anyone whose feet are grounded in the numinous, that are thinking about their creator, that are just groping to know and love and understand the source of our existence. As a Christian, as a Catholic, my faith teaches me that God became a man, and that really revealed the profound dignity of every human being. And so I know that when I look at you, I'm looking in the most beautiful created thing in the cosmos. I can get an Elon Musk spaceship and go for all eternity in any direction. There's going to be nothing more valuable or more precious than you. I don't need to know your ideology, your political party identification, or your religion to know the truth about who you are. My real goal is I want everyone to know how profound they are. I want everyone to know their dignity. I want everyone to see the truth of who they are. The best way to do that is stand with them when they're suffering. That is the best way to teach somebody their value, is to stand with them when they're suffering. And the CCP is grounding people groups down. And I want those people to know their dignity. I don't need to know their religion. I don't need to know their ideologies. I already know who they are. And that is another reason why I feel compelled to stand with the vulnerable, because I want them never to forget who they are.
I guess just last question. Again, we're here at this protest calling for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational terrorist organization. And of course, coming up pretty soon, we're going to have the Stop the Steal rally on Saturday, some of the same organizers here. What do you think these 2 points have in relation to each other, and what brings you here? What made you come out here to be part of this?
Well, if I thought that this election was stolen by labor unions in Philly, I wouldn't be here. I do believe there's clear evidence of the meddling of the CCP. I am here, but I'll tell you the reason I'm really here today is not so much me. It's my posterity, and it's the Uyghur in those camps today. The destiny of the Uyghur and those other minority groups and my co-religionists, they just arrested the most prominent lay Catholic in Hong Kong. It's a bold regime.
Yeah, that was Jimmy Lai. Right?
Yeah. It's a beautiful human being, a beautiful man. Our posterity have a shared future, and we have to ask ourselves. People ask me, what would you call this age? I think it is a new axial age, and that we're going to decide what is at the other end. And I want a culture of life and a civilization of love. And the children in East Turkestan and the children in my home in Kapolei, Hawaii, their destiny is together. So I'm here for them. I'm here for my posterity, and I'm here for the oppressed people in East Turkestan.
Hey, Jason, it's a real pleasure on the show.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
All right, one more interview that I'm going to eat. Oh, I thought you guys left without me.
Yeah, so folks, we're here again at the rally to call for the designation of the Chinese Communist Party as a transnational criminal organization. Some great folks out here. We have a few others we're going to get on the camera now in just a bit, talking about what is happening in China right now and why people should care about this. Yeah, so sir, real pleasure having you on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you have a picture here of your brother, correct? Why don't you tell us first your name, sir?
Yeah, my name is Aziz Sulaiman. I'm Uyghur-American. I'm an epidemiologist.
Turn it a bit more towards this.
Yes, I'm an epidemiologist. So today, in this International Human Rights Day, we came in front of Capitol building to protest. As we are speaking, like we said, millions of innocent Uyghur people are being tortured and forced to denounce their belief, religion, and forced to denounce their ethnic identity. Now, so today I think we are a very successful protest and a lot of speech, so I'm very excited.
So why don't you tell us about this picture you're holding?
Yeah, so among those millions of innocent Uyghur people, my brother was also taken by the Chinese authorities at the end of June 2016, and he was locked up in one of the concentration camps. And when I called my mom, China said he was infected with a virus called religious belief. So he was taken to the concentration camps. And then after a couple of months later, my mother and my sisters were threatened not to contact with me. So it's been more than 4 years, and I don't know what happened to my mother and my other sisters.
So he was arrested just for his religious belief?
Yeah, and my brother is actually a very skillful dentist. His name is Alam Sulaiman, and he is a law-abiding citizen. He never done any crime against Chinese government. But because of his belief, he was taken and then said free education. Now, just 2 months ago, after 4 years later, I found out that he was sentenced to 17 years imprisonment without any trial.
Wait, so he was given 17 years in prison in China because of his religious belief without a trial?
Yeah. So I can't believe this, but it's happening. So not only my brother, there are other millions of Uyghur people just because of their ethnic identity, their belief. Even those Uyghur people who are Communist Party members, they also are locked up in the concentration camps. So this is the excuse, I believe, but China want to exterminate Uyghur people. And because we are the owner of the land called East Turkestan.
Now, if you were to tell people one thing about your brother, about what's happening right now, what would you tell him?
Well, I'll tell him now in the concentration camps, there are millions of Uyghur people being tortured and waiting for to be slaughtered by the communist Chinese authorities, especially organ harvesting. Now I'm holding my brother's picture here, but I tell my Uyghur brothers and sisters in the concentration camps and all over the world that now activists, political activists, human rights activists, journalists are being voice of those voiceless Uyghur people. And if we stand together like this and work hard, eventually those innocent Uyghur people will be relieved from the evil regime of the Communist Chinese Party.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
It's a real
Thank you
pleasure.
very much.
Real pleasure having the show. Thank you.
Voiceless people. Thank you.
My pleasure. Yeah, thank you. Now, folks, again, we're here at the rally to call for the Chinese Communist Party to be designated a transnational criminal organization. One of the organizers with this is the Stop the Steal rally, which is going to be happening on Saturday in Washington, D.C. and in other parts of the U.S. And, folks, that said, join us again on Saturday. We're going to be broadcasting live from that rally. Thank you.
It's not just that we're out here voicing our opinions for us. We're out here voicing our opinions for all Americans, because Americans deserve a free and fair election.
Over. And those people that are telling you right now that it is over are lying to you.
We're not guided by your governor. We're not guided by your Secretary of State. We're not guided by Joe Biden. We're not guided by the New York Times. And we're not guided by all those stations that call the election. You know what we're guided by? The Constitution of the United States.
Extremely gutsy. The Chinese Communist Party is not known for taking criticism very well.
The police have walked off the streets and been firing tear gas and beanbag rounds at the protesters, and they've made several arrests.
警方呢是一直进行了一些推进，并且呢是多次舉起黑旗和橙旗呢，去發射了很多的催淚彈。
即係佢哋放催淚彈嗰時，嘭咁撞到個肚㗎。咁咧就我而家翻轉頭咧，就見到個咁嘅嘢，因為嗰時兵荒馬亂咧，我就。
That's the media liaison. They're telling us that we need to get out of here. They're telling the press to leave.
Boy, this tear gas is getting pretty strong.